I had warden's duty over the lower hold the day we took her, and I have told this account 4 times since, and 4 times the listeners have stopped me to ask the same question, which is whether I am certain it happened the way I say. I am certain. I was there for the start of it and I was there for the end of it, and I am one of the very few who can say both of those things and still be speaking. We were a recovery barge. That is the word our caste uses, recovery, the way the surgeon castes say correction and the breeding houses say continuance, a clean word laid over a thing that does not deserve one. The Korash was 300 spans of riveted hold and reclaimed plate, slow, ugly, and profitable. We did not fight ships. We came after the fighting, or after the breakdowns, or after the long silences that fell over haulers whose drive cores had failed in the dark between the marked lanes. We boarded the stranded and the stricken. We took what could be sold. Sometimes what could be sold was cargo, and sometimes it was crew, and the manifest did not trouble itself with the difference. I was young then. I had not yet shed my second skin, and the elders still called me half-cured, which among the Threnic is the polite way of saying a thing that has not learned to be afraid of the right things yet. My duty was the hold. I fed what we held. I cycled the air, swept the drains, kept the bodies alive enough to bring a price at the rim markets where our captain sold them. It was not honored work. The Threnic do not honor the keeping of things, only the taking of them. But it put me close to her, closer than the deck officers ever came, and so I am the one who saw it first, and the one who understood it last. Her hauler was a single-hold mineral runner called something I never learned, drifting with its core dark and its beacon stuttering on a dying cell. We found it the way we found most of them, by the smell of a dead drive on the long-range gear, and we matched its tumble and cut our way in through the dorsal lock because that was faster than asking. There were 4 humans aboard. 3 of them fought. I do not say this to praise them. They fought the way cornered things fight, without plan, with whatever came to hand, and our boarding caste put them down with the cold efficiency that boarding castes are bred for. And that was the end of the 3 of them, and I will not pretend it was otherwise. The 4th did not fight. She was small. I want that understood before anything else, because it is the whole of why we made the mistake we made. She was small even for a human, and humans are not large, and she stood in the back of the hold with her hands open and visible at her sides, and she watched our boarders come through the smoke with an expression I had no word for then and have several words for now. She did not raise her hands to surrender. She did not raise them to fight. She simply held them where we could see them, palms forward, and she stood very still, and she let us take her, and the whole time her eyes moved across us the way a careful clerk's eyes move across a ledger, counting, marking, setting each of us down in some private column. Vascorin, our captain, came down to the hold to look at the take. He was old for our caste, his ash hide gone the gray of weathered bone, the recessed pits of his eyes so deep they seemed to hold no light at all, and he had run the Korash through 40 years of recovery without once losing a hold to a riot or a buyer to a bad debt, and that record had made him certain of himself in the particular way that long success makes the unworthy certain. He stood over the small human and tilted his skull plate and worked his vocal sac, and the translator gave us his words a half-beat behind, the way it always did. "This one didn't run," he said. "Why didn't this one run?" The boarding chief said she had been like that when they came through, just standing, just watching. Damaged, Vascorin decided, soft in the mind. The other 3 burned out their tempers and this one's got none left. He prodded her shoulder with the back curl of one double-jointed hand, the way you test fruit, and she swayed with it and did not flinch and did not look away from him. Low value. The strong ones bring a price. The empty ones we sell by weight to the labor pits. He made the wet clicking sound that is our laughter. Log her by weight. I logged her by weight. I want to be honest about my own part in this, because every account I give partly so that I will not be permitted to forget it. I put her in the manifest as low-grade biological salvage, sale by mass, no premium, and I assigned her a hold cell on the lower tier, and I cycled her air and set her ration line, And I did all of this with the small, clean efficiency of someone who has decided a thing in front of him is not really a person, because the work is easier when you have decided that. And I had been taught to decide it young. She spoke to me once on the second day. I had come to clear the drain in her cell row, and she was sitting against the bulkhead with her knees drawn up, and she watched me work, and then she said, in the trade Creole that drifts through the rim and that I had enough of to follow, "You should put me off." I did not answer holders. It was a rule, and it was also a habit, and the habit was the stronger of the two. "Not for my sake," she said. "I'd manage for yours." She was quiet about it. There was no heat in her at all. She might have been telling me a weather pattern, a thing she had observed and was passing along because passing it along cost her nothing. "Put me off at the next station, or open the lock and let me drift, I don't care which, and tell your captain it was bad cargo. He'll believe you. I look like bad cargo." She turned her head and looked at the sealed hatch and then back at me. "Because someone is going to come for me. And when he gets here, the manifest isn't going to matter to him. And the rule about not talking to holders isn't going to matter to him. And your captain's 40 good years aren't going to matter to him. He is going to come through this ship, and he is going to take me back, and he is not going to be in a hurry about any of it." I told her to be quiet. I told her there was no one coming, that her hauler had been silent for days before we found it, that no distress call had gone out that our gear had caught, that she was alone in the dark and her people were dead in the upper hold, and there was no one in the whole turning galaxy who knew where she was. She listened to all of it, and then she said, "He doesn't need a distress call." She said it gently. I have thought about the gentleness of it more than I have thought about almost anything else in my life. He'll know. He always knows. We grew up on a hard world, Warden, the kind your caste files under a name that means do not land. And on a world like that you learn one thing before you learn to walk, which is that you do not lose track of your own. He has never once in his life lost track of me. He is not going to start now. I finished the drain and I left, and I did not report the conversation, because reporting it would have meant admitting I had let a holder speak to me at length, and because I had decided in the clean, cowardly way I decided things then, that she was exactly what the captain had said she was. Empty, soft in the mind, telling herself a comfort the way the doomed do. The do-not-land worlds were real. We all knew the registry of them, the worlds graded too lethal to set down on, and humanity's cradle was on that registry, near the top, filed under a designation that the trade tongues render as Heroclass, a word that means a world that takes more than it gives. But knowing a thing is on a registry and believing the thing is something else entirely, and I did not believe. The Threnic are very good at not believing the things that would inconvenience us. He came on the 9th day. I have gone over the timing of it many times. 9 days from the taking. The Korash had moved twice in that time, 2 short jumps along the unmarked drift, the kind of moves that are meant precisely so that no one can follow, and we had told ourselves, the way crews tell themselves things, that we were ghosts now, that whatever had been behind us was behind us. On the 9th day, a small craft came up out of the planet shadow below us, a single-occupant runner not much bigger than a lifeboat, scarred and patched and running dark, and it crossed the gap to our hull on a vector so flat and so patient that the watch officer did not even mark it as a threat at first. He marked it as debris. He marked it as nothing. It mated to our ventral lock the way a careful hand sets a key into a lock it already owns, and the first the bridge knew of any of it was the soft double tap of a seal engaging, a sound the Korash made 40 times a day. A sound that meant only that something had come home. Then the inner lock opened, which it should not have been able to do, because the inner locks answered only to the bridge, and a human walked onto the lower deck of our ship, alone, and the long, unhurried end of us began. I saw him on the hold monitors before I saw him with my own eyes. He was not large. I keep returning to that, because the whole of our certainty had been built on size, on the smallness of the sister and the assumption that smallness ran in the blood, and the brother was not large either. He was a head shorter than our boarding cast, and he carried no obvious weight of muscle, and he was dressed in the plain, hard-wearing gray of someone who works for a living in dangerous places, and the only thing he carried in his hands was nothing at all. He came through the ventral corridor with his hands empty and loose at his sides, and he moved the way water moves downhill, without effort and without hurry and without any apparent thought for the slope, and he did not look lost, and he did not look afraid, and most of all he did not look fast. That was the thing the monitors could not show, and the thing that killed us. On the screen he looked slow. He looked like a man taking an unbothered walk through a ship he half remembered. It was only when you were in the corridor with him that you understood the slowness was a choice, a held thing, a deliberate refusal to spend speed he did not yet need, and that underneath the slowness was something that did not run out. The first to reach him were two of the boarding cast, sent down by the watch officer with the casual confidence of a crew that had never lost a fight on its own decks. They were bred for this. Heavy through the shoulder, double-jointed, fast, armored in the chitin plate our forges grow, each of them more than a match for any holder who had ever come up out of our cells. They met him in the long ventral corridor where the light came down hard and white from the daylight panels. The corridor we kept bright because bright corridors are easy to watch. And on the monitors, I saw the two of them spread to take him from both sides, and I saw him not slow down. I will not describe what he did to them in detail, not because I am protecting anyone's sensibilities. There is nothing tender in me to protect. I do not describe it in detail because the detail is the part I cannot hold in my mind in order. It was very fast and it was very quiet, and it was over in less time than it takes to say that it was over. And when the corridor was still again, the two boarders were on the deck, and the human was still walking, and he had not broken his stride to do it. He had not shouted. He had not roared the way our own warriors roar going into a press. He had not even changed the set of his shoulders. He had walked into two of the deadliest things our caste knows how to grow, and he had walked out the other side of them still walking, and the only difference in him was that his hands were no longer entirely empty, because he had taken something off one of them, a short blade, and he carried it now the way you carry a tool you have not yet decided you need. The watch officer stopped laughing then. I heard it on the bridge channel, the laugh cutting off mid-click, and then his voice, gone high and fast, calling for the corridor to be sealed. We sealed the corridor. The blast doors came down, fore and aft of him, the heavy ones, the ones rated to hold against a hull breach, and for a moment there was a feeling on the Korosh that I can only call relief, the animal relief of a thing that has gotten a door between itself and the thing that frightens it. The human stood in the sealed section and looked at the forward door, and then he looked up slowly, directly into the corridor monitor, directly into the lens, as if he knew exactly where it was, as if he had always known, and he held the look for a moment. He did not speak. He did not make a demand. He simply looked at us through the eye we were watching him with, so that every one of us on the bridge and in the holds felt, all at once, that the watching had reversed, that we were the ones being looked at and counted and set down in a column. And then he looked away from the lens and he went to the wall, and he opened the maintenance panel that controls the local door circuits, the panel that any deckhand on any barge in the drift could open because they are all built to the same tired pattern, and he did something inside it with his hands, unhurried, and the forward blast door, the one rated to hold against the death of the ship, slid up into its housing and let him through. That was when the captain understood, I think, not before. Vascorin had 40 years of holders who could be sealed behind doors. And it took the opening of a door rated against the void to make him understand that the rules he had run his life by did not apply to the thing walking up through his ship. I heard him on the channel. He did not sound afraid yet. He sounded affronted, the way the long certain sound when reality first declines to behave. He ordered the human killed. He ordered everything we had thrown at the lower decks. And the crew obeyed, because we were a crew and obedience was the spine of us, and they went down into the bright corridors to kill one small human who was walking toward the holds. And the Korash spent the next hour learning, deck by deck, that it had taken something it could not keep. I did not go down. My duty was the hold, and the hold was where he was going, and so I stayed at my post the way a warden stays at his post, and I watched him come on the monitors, and I listened to the ship come apart around me in sound. It did not come apart in fire. That is the thing I could never make the listeners understand. There were no explosions. There was no roar of a battle. There was a man walking, and there were our people going to meet him, and then there were fewer of our people, and the walking continued, and the whole of it had the unhurried procedural quiet of a thing being closed down rather than a thing being destroyed. He went compartment by compartment. He did not skip the empty rooms. He cleared each section the way you clear a flooded hold, methodically, leaving nothing behind him that could close again over the path he had opened, and he was patient about it, and he was thorough about it, and he was never once on any monitor, in any corridor, in a hurry. We tried to flood the lower decks with the fire-suppressant gas, the dense cold vapor we keep against a hold fire, which will stop the lungs of most things in the registry inside a minute. He walked through it. I watched him on the monitor walk into the white fog of it with his jaw set and his breath held and his eyes streaming, and I watched him keep walking, counting his steps it seemed, spending the held breath the way he spent everything exactly, with nothing wasted. And on the far side of the gas chamber he stopped and braced one hand on the wall and breathed, once, deeply, deliberately, the breath of a thing reminding its body that the air was survivable again, and then he straightened and went on. The gas that empties the lungs of most of the registry had been, to him, a held breath and a hard moment. His world had taught his blood worse than our suppressant before he was old enough to walk. We had read that in the registry. We had filed it under Harrow class and never once let ourselves believe what the word meant. We tried the boarding cast in numbers, 6 of them in a press in the wide mid-deck junction, the kind of press that no holder in our history had ever broken. I watched that too. I have made myself watch it again in memory more times than I can count, and the thing I take from it is not the speed, though it was very fast, and it is not the blade work, though there was some, near the end. The thing I take from it is that he did not change. 6 of our deadliest closed on him in a place built for them to close, and he met them without anger and without fear, and without the wild glory our own warriors find in the press, and he worked through them the way a man works through hard labor that simply has to be finished before he can move on, with attention and economy and not one wasted motion, and the temperature of him never rose. That was the horror of it in the end. Not that he was strong. We had met strong things. It was that he was cold. There was no heat in him to burn out, no rage to exhaust, no fury we could outlast, nothing in him that would tire of its own intensity and falter. He was not on fire. He was simply, patiently coming, and there was nothing in him for us to wait out. When the mid-deck junction was quiet, he stood among it for a moment, and he was breathing harder now, and there was cobalt blood across the gray of his clothing that was not his, and a long shallow line of red across his own forearm that was, and he looked at the wound the way you look at a thing you will deal with later, and he did not deal with it, and he went on toward the holds. He had perhaps 4 decks to go. I sat at my post in the lower hold, and I understood, with a clarity that I had spent 9 days refusing, that he was going to reach this deck, and that nothing on the Korash was going to stop him, and that when he reached this deck I would be the thing standing between him and the cell where I had filed his sister by weight. I went to her cell row. I do not entirely know why. I have told myself in the kinder accounts that I went to release her, that some part of me had already decided to be on the right side of the arithmetic. I am not sure that is true. I think it is at least as likely that I went because I could not bear to wait for him at my post, because waiting at the post meant being the first thing he found, and the small, soft, cowardly engine that had logged her by weight on the 2nd day was still running on the 9th, and it had done the math and did not want to be the first thing found. Either way I went, and I opened her cell, which a warden could do and a captain's seal could not stop, and she looked up at me from where she sat against the bulkhead with her knees drawn up, exactly as she had sat on the second day, as if she had not moved in all the time between, as if she had simply been sitting and waiting and counting, and she said, "He's close." "He's close," I agreed. There seemed no point now in the rule about not speaking to holders. She got to her feet. She was unhurried about it, the same unhurry I had been watching come up through the ship for an hour, and I understood for the first time that the unhurry was not his alone, that it was a thing in both of them, a thing their hard world had set in their blood, the deep refusal to spend what did not need spending. "When he comes through that hatch," she said, "you're going to want to do something. Reach for something, raise your hands, run. Don't. Whatever you do, do it slowly and keep your hands where he can see them and don't get between us." She looked at me, and there was, I think, something almost like kindness in it, the kindness of someone explaining a danger to a creature too small to have understood it on its own. "He's not angry. People always think he'll be angry. He's the opposite of angry. Angry would be easier for you. Angry burns out." She turned toward the hatch. "Cold doesn't." He came through the hatch a few moments later, and the account of what happened in that cell row is the part I am least able to give cleanly, because it happened around me and over me, and I was, for the length of it, certain I was about to die. There were 3 of the deck crew with me. 3 who had retreated down to the holds when the upper decks fell, and they did exactly what she had told me not to do. They reached for things. They raised their hands. One of them ran. And the human came through the hatch into the bright of the cell row, and he saw his sister standing free and unharmed, and something in him registered that. I saw it register. A single flick of the eyes that confirmed the one fact he had crossed a ship to confirm. And then he dealt with the 3 who had reached and raised and run, and he dealt with them the way he had dealt with everything between the ventral lock and here, without heat, without a word. With the economy of a man finishing the last of a job he had been at for an hour and would like, now, to be done with. He did not deal with me. I had kept my hands where he could see them. I had not reached for anything. I had not run. I had stood very still against the bulkhead with my palms forward, the way she had stood in the smoke of her own hold 9 days before, and I do not say that I did it out of any courage or any decency, because it was neither. It was the small cold engine of my own survival doing the only arithmetic that gave an answer it liked. But I had done it. And the human, when the cell row was quiet, turned and found me standing there with my hands open, and he looked at me, and for a moment I was inside the look I had felt come up through the monitors, the counting look, the look that sets you down in a column, and I understood that the column I was set down in was the one that decided whether the account I am giving now would ever be given by me or only about me. "He's a warden," his sister said. She had come to stand at his side. She did not touch him, neither of them touched the other, not then, and I came to understand later that this too was a thing of their hard world, that touch was a thing they saved for safety and they were not yet safe. "He fed me. He told me there was no one coming." She said it without weight, the same flat passing along she had used on the second day. He was wrong about that part. The human looked at me for a moment longer. Cobalt blood on him that was not his, red on his forearm that was, his breathing slow, and even now, the held thing in him still held even here at the end of it. He did not speak to me. In the whole of it, from the ventral lock to the cell row, I never once heard him speak. He simply looked at me and finished his count, and then he looked away, which was how I learned that I would live, because the look going away from you was the only mercy that ship had to give, and he gave it to me and to no one else who had touched her. He turned to his sister, and he tipped his head toward the hatch, the smallest motion, a thing between 2 people who had grown up not needing words, and she went to him, and they went out of the cell row together, unhurried, and I stood against the bulkhead with my hands still open, and listened to them walk back up through the ship the way he had come down. I did not follow. There would have been no sense in following. But I went, after a time, to my post, and I watched them on the monitors, because watching was the thing I knew how to do, and I watched them cross the dead quiet decks of the Korash, The bright corridors with the daylight panels still pouring down their hard white light over the stillness, and I watched them reach the ventral lock where his patched little runner was waiting, and I watched him put her into it first, and then look back once, up the length of the silent ship. The long, ugly, profitable ship that had taken his own and filed her by weight, and I watched him not do anything to it. He did not arm a charge. He did not vent the holds. He did not, in any of the 40 ways our caste knows how to end a vessel, end the courage. He had come for one thing, and he had it, and the ship was not the thing. And so he simply turned and folded himself into the runner after his sister and sealed the lock, and the small craft dropped away from our hull on the same flat, patient vector it had come up on, down into the planet shadow, and was gone. The Korosh drifted. There were not many of us left to crew it. We had taken her because she was small and quiet and did not fight, and we had logged her by weight, and the bill for that arithmetic had come due over 9 decks in the space of an hour, and the few of us who survived to total it sat for a long time in the daylight quiet and did not speak, because there did not seem to be anything to say that the silence had not already said better. I have shed my second skin since then. I am no longer half cured. I keep my own barge now, a smaller one, an honest salvage runner that takes plate and core and dead drives and nothing that breathes, and the crews of the recovery castes think me soft for it, and I let them think it because the alternative is to explain, and I have found that the explanation does not travel. They were not in the corridor with him. They saw only the slowness on the monitor, and never felt the thing underneath it that did not run out. But I tell the young ones one rule, the half-cured ones, the ones who have not yet learned to be afraid of the right things, and I tell it to them the way she told it to me, flatly, without heat, as a weather pattern, a thing observed and passed along because passing it along costs nothing. There are many things you can take in the dark between the marked lanes, I tell them. You can take plate and core and cargo and the silent stricken ships of the careless. But there is one registry our caste keeps and never truly reads, the registry of the worlds graded do not land, and the people who come up off those worlds carry the world in their blood, and if you are ever foolish enough to take one of them because the one in front of you is small and quiet and does not fight, then understand what you have actually done. You have not taken a holder. You have not filled a cell. You have reached into a hard world and pulled out one thread of it, and somewhere on the far side of the dark there is another thread of that same hard world, and it has already turned toward you, and it is not angry, and it is not afraid, and it is not in a hurry, and it is already patiently coming. Put them off, I tell the young ones. Open the lock and let them drift if you have to. Tell yourselves it was bad cargo. You will not believe me. I did not believe her either. That is the whole of the account, and it is true, and I am the one who fed her, and I am the one who told her there was no one coming, and I am the one, out of all of us, who was permitted to keep his hands open and walk away into the rest of his life to say so.